All right, and welcome. Welcome in person here in Springfield. Welcome online. Again, we're recording this session today so that we can send it out to you for, you can see all of the slides that are shared today on cracking the code on Social Security and Medicare. This is a hot topic. It's a huge topic for our clients. I know Shannon has a number of clients. This is exactly what she does every day as well. I'm going to make some introductions to start. First of all, I am Lisa Jones. I'm Managing Director and Investment Advisor here with Prime Capital. We also have Brandon Lee, who is a certified financial planner, and he's also an advisor in our office. He has 14 years experience doing this, and he's going to bring the Social Security piece of this message today. And Shannon Black is the owner and broker at JRS Healthcare in Kansas City. Now, she works heavily in the Medicare market. That's something we don't do here locally in our office, so we've brought in an expert to talk about that today. And Shannon and her team have been helping people transition successfully to Medicare since 2011. So hopefully a wealth of information here today. I mentioned before you can type in the chat box if you have questions. We are going to open for Q&A at the end of this session, about 10 minutes. We'll try to be respectful of time today. Shannon will spend 20 to 25 minutes speaking on Medicare. Brandon has about 10 minutes on Social Security, and then maybe a 10-minute Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I think we'll get started. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So I've got Shannon's slides here for you.
Well, thank you guys for inviting me and having me do this, and thank you for everyone who signed up to participate in this. I really much appreciate it, and I think education in all aspects can go very far and can really just overall help feeling like you're making the right decision for you. And that's the moral of the story at the end of the day. So, just like Lisa said, I'm Shannon Black, owner and broker with JRS Healthcare Solutions. We were founded in 2011, and essentially, as a health insurance brokerage, we essentially work for our clients. A brokerage means that we are not captive to one set company. We work with a multitude of carriers across the markets, from anywhere from under 65, small group, and seniors, to really help when that time period comes, provide you and navigate the options with you so that you feel like you can make an educated, decisive choice that's best for your healthcare needs at the end of the day. And we don't just help you enroll, we want to be there for you through your journey of your health coverage. So we want to be your advocate if something is going wrong, if there's a reason that claim wasn't paid. We want to be your ongoing resource for your future needs through your future transitions of coverage. So that's what we do as a health insurance brokerage. That is the lane we stay in, because we do not handle too much with anything in regards to financials or anything like that. Obviously, you guys have a great company to work with in that regard. So we mainly just stick to the health. We are based out of Overland Park, but we are located or can work out of about 15 states. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. Essentially, I thought we would start kind of as time goes on with tips before you retire, before 65 there. And so I just kind of listed out here a quick little run-of-the-mill things to keep in mind. Most people, if you work for an employer, typically you're going to be offered COBRA. COBRA is a continuation of your current coverage through your employer, and it can typically last 18 months is really the time stamp of where it goes. It's the same deductibles, networks, everything you're used to when you had employer coverage. You're just now paying 100 to 102% of the premium. And so the first thing I always recommend is I want to know where you're at. Just like anything else, right? We want to know what's your starting point. So I want to know what COBRA is offering you, because as we discussed, I want to know your healthcare needs. And if you've hit your deductible that year and you have more needs, healthcare needs to pop up before the end of the year, some of those things play into factor. The next tip essentially is to speak to a health insurance broker. I really emphasize the broker, agent. It can be used laterally, but broker just means, right, that we work with a bunch of different companies. So we're truly having an unbiased guidance for you. And we're a free resource to you. If someone is charging you, I'd probably run away, but we are a free resource to you. We get paid through the insurance companies when we enroll a member. And so just use us for our education. And then here's a quick little run-of-the-mill list of some options that we will explore in regards to alternatives outside of COBRA. So the first is probably what a lot of people are used to, healthcare.gov marketplace. And then you've got private, individual, and family plans. And those are like if we just go directly to the insurance companies versus going through the marketplace if you don't qualify for maybe tax credit. And then there's ministry shared plans. These last three, they were really popular in the late 2010s, but due to the American Rescue Act in 2021 and the Inflation Reduction Act, these legislations acts that were approved in 2022, more people than ever are actually qualifying for tax credits in the marketplace. It's not just for the low income individuals anymore. So we start there because it's going to be your most lateral move coverage wise, and depending on your income could also make sense financially as well, versus before 2021 it really wasn't an affordable option for most. And so another tip that's not noted on here, but I always think it's best to really start preparing for retirement, obviously you're a few years, months, whatever maybe, but give it some time so that you guys can create the plan that you need, because typically when we are exploring healthcare.gov or the marketplace, those tax credits, right? They're going to be basing that premium or those tax credits that you may qualify for based on the year you get the plan. So it probably makes sense to retire potentially in the beginning of the year or December or such, so it takes you through the end of the year, because then you're starting fresh with the new income for that coming year and can use potentially that lower income without having to include any buyout or any vacation accrued, anything like that if you were to retire in Q3 or Q4. And as we determine when we look through these options, we'll ask your healthcare needs. So we'll go into any pre-existing conditions, medications, all of those things depend essentially what may be the best route for you to go. Okay. I tend to ramble, so I'll try to really keep it on track. Okay, so now transitioning then into what Medicare is. So Medicare is essentially a federal health insurance program for typically our seniors. It is managed by the Center of Medicare and Medicaid, CMS, and it is a department of the Health and Human Services. So that's kind of just the exact definition of what it is. Who can get Medicare? So I love working with the Medicare market. It's honestly my favorite. It's a wonderful market to work with because you guys are so great, really. But there are three ways essentially to get onto Medicare. When you've been on long-term disability for 24 months, you're put onto Medicare in your 25th month. If you have end-stage renal disease or ALS, that's another reason. Or like most, you are essentially turning 65, or potentially you are continuing to work, and that's something that you may have to review if you were to sign up at 65 or later. So when to sign up? So essentially, we'll get to this in a little bit, but there are three different ways to enroll depending on if you're collecting your Social Security benefits. And if you are, you'll automatically be rolled into Medicare 3 months out before you turn 65. You'll receive your Medicare card. It's your red, white, and blue one. However, if you're not collecting Social Security benefits, you're going to postpone it till later retirement age. Then we'll have to manually enroll you into Medicare. And there's two big time periods that most people transition into Medicare. The first is your initial enrollment period, and that time frame starts 3 months before your 65th birthday month, your 65th birthday month, or 3 months after. And so I often get asked the question, when will Medicare start, or the soonest it could start? The soonest it can start is the first of the month you turn 65. If you turn 65 if your birthday is on the first of a month, it's going to start the month prior. Essentially, Your initial enrollment period, like we said, is that 7-month window. And depending on when you apply, so if you wait to apply the month you turn 65, your benefits will not start until the next month. So you have to kind of keep an eye out in that regard. If you do it the 3 months prior, it will start that first of the 65th birthday month. Any of those 4 months following, it's going to start the first of the coming month. The next option is a special enrollment period. And essentially, let's say you delay Medicare because you or your spouse are working past 65. Because most people are doing this now, and honestly, with inflation. So the big thing to know there, if you're going to delay Medicare and not sign up at 65, is to know if you work for a company that has more than 20 employees. Because if you work for a company who has less than 20 employees or you're self-employed, you must get into Medicare at 65 during that initial enrollment period without penalty. If you essentially work for a company with more than 20 employees, then you're able to delay Medicare until you're ready to retire. And you'll go through a special enrollment period at that time frame. And what that process will look different than the initial enrollment period. So the real kickers are these penalties if you don't sign up on time. I often get asked about those, but the first thing to know is if you're going to work past 65, do you work for a company with more than 20 employees? Because then you have the option to. Okay, so the next step is essentially signing up for Medicare. So there are 3 ways to essentially enroll in Medicare. Prior actually to COVID, there was only 2, believe it or not. They didn't have online. So as we discussed, if you're collecting Social Security before 65, you'll be automatically enrolled. And you'll just get that out of the blue in the mail, your Medicare red, white, and blue card from the Social Security Administration. But if you are delaying, there are 3 ways. The easiest way is online through the Social Security website, through your My Social Security account. And essentially, that's the easiest, efficient way to do this. The next option is a little bit more difficult due to COVID, is making an appointment at your local Social Security office. Go down, speak to them, or you can call them is the third option. And the month time frame to when you book that, they're booking about a month out. So that's something to be cognizant of as well. I do help people enroll online. I also can send them instructions if they're self-sufficient and want to try themselves. So we are more than happy to help you through that period as well, because government sites are confusing. Okay. So kind of getting a little bit more into the granular information. Original Medicare. So original Medicare or traditional Medicare, it's a synonym, is made up of Part A and Part B. Okay, so you've enrolled into Medicare, you now have your Part A, Part B, and that's the original Medicare. It's a foundation insurance, and it's not expected to cover all of your healthcare costs, and it's not free. So most people, Part A is premium free. Typically, if you or your spouse has worked at least 10 years in the United States and you paid for it through taxes. And Part A is anything inpatient related, so inpatient hospitalization, skilled nursing, home health care. Okay. Part B has a monthly premium associated with it, and that's dependent on your income. So in 2024 here, if your income is under $206,000 as a couple reported in 2022, because they do a 2-year look back, then the base premium will be $174.70 for this year, but it does go up every year, unfortunately. If you sold a business or sold a house or got a bonus, like we said, or got a payout and you had all this vacation time built up, then that does affect your income, right? And so, like I said, they're looking 2 years back. So that's part of the planning that goes into it, because you may have had a really one-off year, right? But depending on if that income is above that 206,000 for a couple or 103 as an individual, you may have essentially what could be called an IRMA. And Social Security determines what this is. It's an initial determination, and they'll add an income adjustment onto that premium of $174.70 if you were higher than that mark. And depending on how much over and what bracket you were in, depends on how much you may pay additionally of IRMA. Now you can always appeal it because, typically we're in our highest income years, we hope, at that time frame, right? And so, right now, if you're getting on Medicare, they're looking at 2022s. So next year in 2025, they'll look at 2023s. So it's a year over year that they'll review it. But like I said, you can always appeal it if you feel like, you disagree with it, or, it was just kind of a one-off year and it really is not substantial to what your income's typically like. There is a form on Social Security website. Okay. So additionally, so now you've got Medicare Part A and Part B, right? Now, like we said, Medicare is foundational insurance. And so just like normal insurance, there's costs associated with it. We discussed just to have the government's program, there is a premium for Part B, which is what your day-to-day coverage is going to be. Doctors, labs, outpatient surgery, MRIs, anything basically out of a hospital falls under Part B. And so, just like normal insurance with Medicare A and B, there are deductibles, co-pays, co-insurances, and what's not what people are used to is there's no max out of pocket. You've probably always had a cap in what you could spend in your worst year of health, right? Now, with just having A and B, there is no max out of pocket cap. And so people could add additional coverage, and my recommendation is to do so because essentially you want to cap your cost if you have a major medical bill. So if you have cancer tomorrow and you only have A and B original Medicare, you'll be paying 20% of all your chemo treatments and there's no cap. You can proceed on, Lisa. So some things that Medicare does not cover are some of our basic things, right? So Medicare doesn't cover prescription drug coverage. Anything that you pick up at a pharmacy, they're not covering. Dental, vision, obviously there's no max out of pocket. Hearing, long-term care, fitness. If you're outside the US, Medicare is a US-based program, so it's only going to cover you in the US or US territories. And custodial care. So essentially what we need to do is fill in some of these gaps, right? So your medications, you'll need to get through a drug plan, blah, blah, blah. All right, so you have original Medicare A and B, and now you're gonna look at options to cover your max out of pocket to protect yourself financially. So you have two options to do so. You need to have A and B in order to have either one of these options. So let's start with option one. Option one is you stay with original Medicare A and B, and that means that your claims for hospital and medical services for Part A and Part B are submitted to the federal government, and the government will pay those claims if they approve them. And then you buy a Medicare supplement or a Medigap policy, it's the same thing, it's a synonym, to come and pay those deductibles, co-insurances that Medicare doesn't cover on that approved claim. So just like we discussed, we are now filling in those gaps of what Medicare does not cover in that regard. And then you buy a Part D standalone drug plan and typically a dental and vision plan. So this option, the way to think about it is think of it as you pay upfront for your coverage. And then if anything is to happen, you've paid for it through your premiums. So this is going to be a separate premium on top of what you pay for Part B. So it's for the risk adverse types of individuals, those who really like predictability of costs, those who really like to know I'm going to spend this much on my monthly and annual budget of healthcare cost. It's good for those who want flexibility, have maybe a lot of out-of-pocket, high medical needs. So that's typically who likes option one. Medicare supplement premiums are often based on where you live, your zip code, and if you're male or female in age, because these supplements, they have nothing to do with the government. These are sold through insurance companies, okay? And so with Medicare supplements, they are standardized plans, and they are recognized by an alphabetical letter, such as Plan F, Plan G, Plan N. All of those are supplements. They just cover different things and they cost a different amount. So the biggest thing, like I said, since they're standardized plans, that means that any carrier that's selling a Medicare supplement, let's just say Plan G policy, then essentially it doesn't matter what carrier is selling you that policy, the benefits are the exact same. Okay, so the big secret here, that's why you work really with a broker versus a captive agent, is you don't want to overpay for it. Just because your neighbor is on Humana doesn't mean that Humana is the best option for you, because cost is the only difference between one Medicare supplement policy under that alphabetical letter compared to another. And typically people, we look at a multitude of things when deciding what carrier to go with. How long have they been in the market? What's the rate stability? Maybe you've had United for 30 years and you really like them, whatever may be. Those kind of factors could play into deciding. So in Kansas, where we're located in Overland Park here, I do live in the Missouri side though. In Kansas, the supplements are based on attained age, meaning that the premiums can go up as you age. Missouri, on the other hand, is an issue age state. So essentially the premium doesn't go up as you age. Now, both states, essentially, you could get rate increases due to rising healthcare costs, inflation, but in Missouri, it's just because of that, not because you're continuing to get older. So in Missouri, rates are typically starting off higher than in Kansas on the Medicare supplement side because of those factors, because Kansas is going to essentially build up in time. Now we'll go into this a little bit, but I'm a big believer in Medicare supplement plan ends. I believe long term they're going to have a really strong rate stability. So that's what I believe under a Medigap plan N. And so under a Medigap plan N, that individual is responsible for the Part B deductible under original Medicare. So for 2024, it's $240 annually. Okay, so that means if I go on to Medicare, I go to the doctor's, like let's say May here, I'm starting Medicare. I go to the doctor's office, I have a lab test that falls under Medicare Part B because it's outpatient, right? I'll pay the first $240. It's an annual deductible. Once that's met, Medicare will pay 80% of my medical bills, and that supplement's picking up the other 20%. Typically, most people are eligible for G or an N plan these days, just FYI if you're getting on to 65 or turn 65 after 2020. If I'm on an N plan, everything works just like I just mentioned for G, right? You've got your $240 deductible, and then Medicare typically pays 80, supplement 20, but on an N plan, I could have some office copays that are capped at $20 or less. So you can anticipate, because I have some financial exposure on an N plan versus G there, the N premium is going to be less than a G. So just for a quick run of the mill, price wise, for a 65-year-old female in Kansas on a plan N is around 82-ish a month. Missouri, you're looking at more 124. And then a plan G, who doesn't have the copays, the member would just pay the first $240 deductible, and then everything else is covered for that year. The pricing is more 110 in Kansas for a female, or 135 in Missouri. Now, like I said, that's females. Males are more expensive because you typically tend to have more medical needs as you get older. So that's option one. And once again, it's for those who like predictability. There's no networks. I can see any provider in the US. So if I want to be able to go to Mayo Clinic, MD Anderson, then I can do that because original Medicare is my primary insurance, the government. The supplement's just secondary, picking up what Medicare does not cover. So there's no network. So for the people who like to travel, flexibility, or see any provider you want, this is really more towards that option that those types of individuals like. We're not going to go too in the weeds of Medicare Part D drug plans, but as we discussed, A and B does not cover drug coverage, and the supplement is just picking up what Medicare doesn't cover in the A and B medical side there. So you get a standalone Part D drug plan on top of that, and that's based on your zip code and the prescriptions you take. That really decides which plan's potentially best for you. All right, option two, which is the fastest growing option in today's market, is known as Medicare Advantage plans, or replacement Medicare, or Part C. So essentially, Part C is an original Medicare. These are sold by private insurance companies who have contracts with Medicare. Because I know there's lots of vagueness surrounding these, and they hit the marketing really hard on these Advantage plans. These insurance companies have contracts with the government, essentially. So Medicare pays them a fixed fee every month. That Part B premium, that $174.70, and potentially IRMA, they give that to these insurance companies to now manage your care. Okay, so they are getting a little piece of the pie, right? And so with the Medicare Advantage plan, because they're transferring the A and B benefits, the government would typically handle, like on option one, you're now getting your Part A, which is your hospital coverage, and Part B, your medical coverage, in one plan, and you'll often get your Part D prescription drug coverage as well in the plan. It's all built into one, but instead of the government being responsible essentially for your care and the cost of your care, you have transferred that risk to these insurance companies to handle. So now all your claims are going to that insurance company. Aetna, Blue Cross, United, they all try to compete, right? And so in a Medicare Advantage plan, unlike Medicare supplement plans, the Advantage plans are 1-year contracts. So every year it will start over, just like your group plan starting over in January, right? So when you enroll in an Advantage plan, it's typically for that current year, and then you'll essentially get notified of any changes in September that they're making to that exact plan you're in for the coming year, any copays, max out-of-pockets, things like that. So now let's kind of talk a little bit of the financial aspect of an Advantage plan. In an Advantage plan, the way that it functions is you are capping your max out-of-pocket. So essentially, you'll have like we said, the insurance companies are managing these, right? So you have networks, prior authorizations, step therapy, meaning an insurance company can tell you to do, the lower cost treatment before you get the approved higher cost treatment, whatever may be. Very similar to the group coverage, the insurance companies are handling your care. So just like what we're used to as well, Advantage plans, they'll be networks, just like we said. So some will be HMOs, which means health maintenance organization, and there's no out of network coverage. Others are PPO, which means you have the flexibility essentially to go in and out of network. Obviously, as we know, there's more of an incentive to stay in network because your cost will be less, but you do have the flexibility to go out of network on a PPO if you so desire. Often in a Medicare Advantage plan, you're getting value-added benefits not covered by original Medicare. So like we said, the dental, the vision that Medicare does not cover, you're going to get those included in an Advantage plan typically. So original Medicare A and B, something to always remember about them is, like we said, they're foundational insurance. They are about diagnosis and treatment of medical conditions. It is not about prevention. So in an Advantage plan, you're going to see more benefits catered towards prevention, such as physicals. Medicare does not cover physicals. They cover wellness visits, but not physicals. Medicare doesn't cover dental, just like we discussed, but most Advantage plans are going to include dental benefits, up to $3,000 potentially, who knows, depending on where you live, right? So Medicare doesn't cover hearing. So if it's medically related, then yes, but if you have wax in your ear, Medicare won't cover that. Essentially, you'll see that, that's how these Advantage plans really try to decipher from one to the other between the carriers, is they try to compete on those value-added benefits. Another big thing seniors typically love about Advantage plans are the fitness programs. You see that in Advantage plans. You do not see that in option one typically. So you get a free gym membership, and people love that. So the Medicare Advantage plans are low cost. So let's kind of talk on a financial scale there. They're low cost. You still pay that Part B premium to Social Security every month, but that's a fixed cost for the benefit for you, essentially. But you will enroll in a Medicare, but when you enroll, I should say, in a Medicare Advantage plan, most of them, depending on your area, are $0 monthly premiums or very low cost. With an Advantage plan, you're paying for the services as they're needed. So like we said, option one, you pay up front, right? Option two, you pay as you go. So it's like a traditional health insurance with co-pays. So most Advantage plans don't have deductibles, and a deductible is typically what you have to pay before insurance really kicks in, but on an Advantage plan, that's not the case. So on an Advantage plan, you will have a copay to go see a specialist, $25. You'll go see get an MRI and you'll have a copay. So you pay a set dollar amount per service. And then there's a max out of pocket, so you're not endlessly paying. There is a cap on what you could spend in your worst year of health. And then that kicks in and restarts in January. So there's been a lot of talk nowadays. It's about a 50-50 split between option 1 and option 2. For the first time ever, more people are leaning into an Advantage plan. But Advantage plan, networks, they're getting better. They didn't always used to be so dominant. Some of the carriers now have national networks, which is great for those who are traveling to have that flexibility. You don't have to pay an extra premium for your drug plan if you take medication, if you don't take any medications or on very inexpensive medications versus you do on option 1. So essentially, Medicare says that if you don't have, and we'll get into some late penalties a little bit on, but Medicare says that if you don't have credible drug coverage, because they don't provide prescription drug coverage, right? So if you don't have credible drug coverage, either as option 1, a standalone drug plan, or built into your Advantage plan, you will pay a late enrollment penalty if you did not have credible coverage. So if you didn't sign up at 65 for some reason and you didn't have employer coverage and you just delayed, you will have a late enrollment penalty if you did not have credible coverage. Question. Well, Lisa, did you say you wanted me to wait till the end on questions?
You can go ahead and answer now if you'd like.
Okay, awesome. So can you switch between option 1 and 2 during your retirement? Good question. So you do get 2 trial periods when deciding, because obviously I call this the 30-year decision. Okay, so you will get trial periods on each option. So option 1 with the Medicare supplements, when you first get onto Medicare, whenever that may be, either at 65 or later, they have to accept you. You're guaranteed approved for those supplements, no health questions asked. But let's say, everyone's talking about Advantage plans, or maybe you're getting some rate increases and you want to try an Advantage plan. We'd move you during open enrollment, and you have 12 months to see if you like that Advantage plan. If you do not like it within those 12 months, we can bring you right back to the same supplement you had before without any health questions asked. Beyond the 12 months, it's always going to take health questions or underwriting to ever get back to a supplement. Okay, so they're not sold through the government, so they don't need to accept you under the Affordable Care Act. And so they only have to accept you when you're first getting on or during that one time in your lifetime trial period. If you were to ever switch from maybe you just want to lower your premiums, right? So you go from Humana's Plan G to United's Plan G, it's always going to require underwriting, even if you're staying in the same supplement. Now, let's say you start off on an Advantage plan. Advantage plans are offered through essentially the government, right? They're administering them at the end of the day. The insurance companies are managing them. So because of that, they have to follow the Affordable Care Act guidelines where they cannot deny you due to pre-existing conditions. So they will accept you when you first get on, and then they will always accept you. That first 12 months that you're on, or if you start, once you turn 65 and you get on to Medicare, you have basically a year if you start on an Advantage plan to move to a supplement without any underwriting. Outside of that time period, you're always going to have to go through underwriting to get to a supplement. So it's not as easily interchangeable. You do have trial rights under both options because it's obviously a big decision, but it's really, it's not as easy to start in option 2 and get to option 1 later on versus option 1. If you start there, you can always try an Advantage plan at some point and they have to accept you. Okay, let's see, where were we? Okay, so I just wanted to kind of make one little note on that last between the 2 additional coverage. I just really want you guys to know at the end of the day, it's not one way's better than the other, it's just different. So what brings that individual the most peace of mind is really how you decide what option's best for you. So when you're looking at the Medicare market, don't just look at what your needs are now, right? But look at what they could be as you age, your family history. Because like we discussed, these Medicare supplement plans, outside of when you first get on a Medicare, you have to go through underwriting. So it's great when you start on the Medicare Advantage plan because it doesn't cost you a lot, but as you get older, and all of a sudden you start having more healthcare needs and you want to go back to original Medicare and buy a supplement, it may not be too easy. And so essentially, as long as you understand you're taking a risk going with an Advantage plan, because they are for more the risk takers versus option one's more of the risk adverse individuals, that's just something definitely to know, right? But these Advantage plans, they're very attractive these days. And, after a while, people hate dealing with insurance companies, right? Insurance companies are all about controlling their cost. They'll do what they have to do to have prior authorizations. They'll try to have you do lower cost treatments. If I need a PET scan or CT scan, I can't just go get it. If I'm on an Advantage plan, I have to get it authorization first. So it's just, it's just something to keep in mind. I'm not biased towards one, and no broker you should be speaking to should be biased towards one or the other. FYI there. Some definitely have their viewpoints. But moving into the exciting things is the Medigap foreign travel benefit. So like we said, Medicare A and B does not cover foreign travel outside of the US or US territories. So I often get asked, because you're in these great years of life where you want to see the world. And so if you go with the Medicare supplement plan, you will have a foreign travel benefit. Essentially, it's only to a certain amount. So if injury or illness occurs within the first 60 days of your trip, then they will pay 80% after a $250 deductible. And in your lifetime, your supplement will pay $50,000 on your medical needs for foreign injury or illness. So you do have a decent amount, because the US is probably the most expensive in healthcare needs. But I do highly recommend always looking at an international travel plan, either option you go with. Okay, so anyone who's maybe past 65 probably knows or gets hounded during certain enrollment time periods of the year, right? Or we all see the ads at certain time periods, right? And so I just wanted to throw this in here essentially as there's really two major ones to kind of just keep in mind outside of your initial enrollment period when you first get on, or special enrollment period. Is the first is really the October 15th to December 7th. That's a 7-week window when it's called the annual enrollment period. They all sound the same, but that's the technical wording for it. Where anyone who's already enrolled into Medicare can review their coverage for January 1 the coming year. And let's say you make a plan change from United Healthcare's plan, their Advantage plan, to Aetna's Advantage plan during this time period. Like we said, it starts January 1. Well, let's say, you're kind of regretting that choice. You want to go back to United Advantage. This is a period that is not really, too heavily hit on, but January 1 to March 31st is kind of like a Medicare Advantage enrollment period. So you can switch if you feel like from one Advantage plan to the other, if you feel like you didn't make the right choice. Okay, and then Lisa. Okay, I just wanted to touch on late enrollment penalties, because Medicare, not really Medicare, but people love to use fear tactics in regards to Medicare and scams and things like that. So I just kind of want to outline what the late enrollment penalties are, because people are like, you have to sign up now. And like hopefully everyone, the moral of the story is just speak to someone to review your options before that time period comes. But there are 2 late enrollment penalties that could incur if someone either does not sign up at 65 or does not have credible coverage working for them or their spouse for a company with more than 20 employees. You just waited till 68 for no reason. So there is a Part B that Medicare, that's what they cover. You will have a 10% of the annual Part B, so 10% of that $174.70 for every year you didn't have Medicare Part B when you could have, is now added on to that $174.70, and you will have that for life, that late enrollment penalty. Part D is a little bit less. Essentially, it's like 1% of the national average for a Part D drug plan, which is $34 here in 2024. So think of it, every year you essentially have a 12% on top of that Part D drug plan you may get, or that Advantage plan that may be $0, but now you have a Part D late enrollment penalty piled on because you didn't sign up on time or when you could have. So they're not huge, but they are for life. This is the last bit of it. Essentially, it's just top 3 tips and best practices. At the end of the day, hopefully people just want what's best for you guys. And so my recommendation is always to speak to someone. Don't assume you know everything. We can't know everything, right? So talk to a professional in your area to really know what your options are. And then really the next bit is don't just jump into the lowest cost option, essentially, okay? Under 65 or even over 65, you need to understand what your healthcare needs are. Cost obviously is a big factor, but it shouldn't be the only factor in there. So you want to not just look at the premiums, but what are my regular healthcare needs over time? And the last little bit is just to review it annually because finances and health can change so quickly. So if you're getting a rate increases on your insurance every year, don't just assume that the plan you're in is just the best fit for you and that's just what you have to take forever ever on. There's new competitors, there's new plan designs, so just review on a regular basis. And that's really it.
Thank you, Shannon. We really appreciate the information. It is complex. There's a lot to know here. I like your suggestion of, as a best practice, talking with someone who is a professional who can kind of walk through the different plans with you. This is Shannon's contact information. We will be sending these slides out, so you will have another opportunity to see Shannon's slides again. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Brandon. Let's get Brandon's screen and slides ready to go here. And Brandon, why don't you tell us more about Social Security?
All right, thank you, Lisa. My name is Brandon Lee. I'm a certified financial planner based here in the Springfield, Missouri office. And really the point of the webinar today was just to kind of help people, they work all their life, they get into their 60s or close to their 60s, they're thinking about retirement, and then they have these two huge things they got to make decisions on, Medicare and Social Security, and that can lead to a lot of questions. There could literally be 103 questions about Social Security, so I'm going to preface that, but I just wanted to take about 10 minutes and just highlight 3 of the questions that seem to come my way the most often. Please take anything I say in the next 10 minutes as general advice. I would certainly recommend speaking with your financial advisor about your specific situation because there's just so many moving parts, so many variables. I wish there was one answer to these 3 questions. There's not. But with that said, let's go ahead and jump in. And the first question I get all the time is, when should I begin taking Social Security? Again, it's a good question. I wish I had one answer. There isn't one answer. The first thing that you really want to find out, and we'll talk about this here in a few slides, is what your full retirement age is. Probably for the first 60, 70 years of Social Security, everybody had a full retirement age of 65. That was just dictated by the government. I think that's why 65 just kind of became the default retirement age within our culture. But a few years ago, Congress incrementally decided that, hey, maybe we need to raise that full retirement age because people are living longer. The government doesn't exactly balance their budget very well. So most of you are going to have a full retirement age that's either 66 or 67. And that's going to be based upon what year you were born. And before I'm done, I'll go over how you can find out exactly what your full retirement age is. But for the sake of the slide example that you see before you, this person has a full retirement age of 66. That is what Social Security has arbitrarily decided is your full retirement age in which you will receive your full Social Security benefit. However, with that said, you've really got a panorama here of being able to take your benefit anywhere from age 62 to age 70. So what I wanted to highlight here on this slide was, if somebody wants to start their Social Security benefit at age 62, they can, but they are going to be taking a 25% decrease in their monthly amount. So that's something to consider because you're locking in a 25% lower monthly amount for the rest of your life. Now, the upside to that is you start getting checks 4 years sooner. So again, there's a lot of things that have to go into that decision. Conversely, if you reach full retirement age and you're like, I don't really need this Social Security money right now, Social Security will let you defer up to age 70. And as you can see here, every year that you defer past your full retirement age, your benefit goes up 8%, which is pretty significant. Now, your benefit does not increase any past the age of 70. So if you're 70 and you have not taken your Social Security benefit, then you need to go ahead and start taking it, because you do not get any additional benefit to wait beyond that. On my next slide here, I just wanted to go over a couple of things to consider in terms of whether or not you should take it early or you should take it late. And again, these are general guidelines. There's so many variables that go into this. The simplest thing with when should I take Social Security is if we all knew at what age we were going to die, then we could do the math and we can mathematically tell you the best age to take Social Security to maximize your benefit. However, most of us, thankfully, don't know exactly when that's going to be. However, if you've got medical issues or there's generally short life expectancy within your family tree, you may want to consider taking it early. If you're in relatively good health and everybody, your parents, your aunts and uncles, people in your family tree generally live into their 80s and 90s, that might be a case for deferring your Social Security benefit until a later age. A couple other things to consider. If you are a more aggressive investor, and what I mean by that, if you have maybe more than half of your portfolio in the stock market, and that portfolio has the potential for some significant growth, then you may want to take your Social Security benefit early and allow that portfolio to continue to grow for you. Conversely, if you're more of a risk-averse investor, you're more of a CD type of a person, the stock market's not really your thing, then starting to pull income off of those investments early and allowing that Social Security benefit to mature and even grow an additional 8% a year may make more sense for you. Also, pensions are becoming less and less, but there are still people out there that have a significant pension. Maybe your spouse has a significant pension. If you have a pension that is going to cover the majority of your Social Security, or excuse me, of your retirement income, then going ahead and taking your Social Security benefit earlier may make sense. But again, there's way more variables than the 6 bullet points that I put on this screen. So it's definitely a conversation that you want to have with somebody, and it's probably part of a larger financial plan. The second question that I get a lot is, will I pay taxes on my Social Security? And we're going to go over how that's calculated. We're going to go over whether you will or won't. But for the majority of you, the answer is yes. And really, the only way to not pay taxes on your Social Security is to basically not make any money. And so I don't know that necessarily is a strategy that I would recommend. But your Social Security benefits are 100% tax-free if your income is low enough. And we'll go over what those numbers are here in a minute. But as your income goes up, the portion of your Social Security benefit that is taxed increases. It will never be more than 85%. Now, sometimes people see that 85% and they think that's the tax rate. That is not the tax rate. That's the percentage of the benefit that would be subject to taxes. So even in the worst case scenario, 15% of your Social Security benefit, as the law is currently written, is received tax-free. But for a majority of people, 85% of your Social Security benefit is going to be taxed at whatever federal tax rate you're in. And obviously that would be something that you would want to discuss with your financial advisor or your CPA. On the next slide, for those of you that like to dig into the weeds or kind of wonder arbitrarily how these numbers and formulas are decided, whether or not or at what rate your Social Security is going to be taxable is really based upon this formula, your adjusted gross income. On your 1040 tax form, I believe that's line 11. I'm guessing most of you have probably done your taxes for 2023 or are getting close to wrapping that up. So if you're curious what your AGI is, you could look on your tax return or ask your tax preparer. But what you do is you take that number, you add in any non-taxable interest. Non-taxable interest, for the most part, is going to be any interest you may receive if you own municipal bonds. Most interest is subject to tax, but muni bonds do not require taxes paid on that interest. So if you have any muni bond interest, that will be factored into the equation. And then they're going to take half of your Social Security benefit and they're going to add that. So whatever those three numbers come up to, you'll see on the next slide here, is going to determine what percentage of your Social Security is going to be subject to taxes. So as I said a moment ago, it is possible for your benefits to be 100% tax-free or none of it to be subject to taxes. If you're a single filer, that means that your formula based upon the previous slide is going to need to be less than $25,000. If you're married filing jointly, then that number is going to need to be less than $32,000. It's just not very often that I come across people that actually fall within that bandwidth. If you fall within that bandwidth, then you're going to receive your Social Security benefit completely tax-free. For most of you, you're probably going to be down in that 85%. I mean, for a single person, your income only has to be 34,000. For married filing jointly, it only has to be 44,000. For most retirees that we work with or that I come across, that's a threshold that is usually met. So for most people, probably 85% of your Social Security benefit is going to be subject to taxes. You'll see there on that chart, there is a kind of a small bridge area there between 0 and 85%, where only half of your Social Security would be subject to taxes. But in terms of planning for the future and how much Social Security benefits going to be taxable, I would say for the majority of you, they're probably going to be taxable on some level. The third question I just wanted to hit real quick, and then I'll pause and see if you have any questions. And I know I'm only scratching the surface on Social Security because there's literally so much to talk about, but is Social Security in trouble? It's a fair question. I've got a few thoughts on it. I'm sure you probably have some thoughts on it as well. But one of the things that I do find people say is, I'm going to take my Social Security at 62 because I don't trust that Social Security is going to be there. Is Social Security going to be around 100 years from now? I don't know. But for most people, I think over the age of 50, certainly over the age of 60, I think Social Security is not going to be affected for you. Congress is going to have some decisions to make. And when they generally make those decisions, they tend to grandfather those in. So it's more likely to be your kids and grandkids that are going to have some tweaks to their Social Security benefits. But Social Security, touching retiree Social Security check is political suicide. So even though Congress isn't quick to act on most things, they are not going to touch Social Security until they absolutely have to. Now, you'll see here, Social Security actually began as part of the New Deal back in the 1930s. And then Lyndon Johnson rolled out Medicare as part of the Great Society in the 1960s. So in 1970, you can see that Medicare and Social Security were 19% of the federal spending or the federal budget. You can see that number is getting close to 40%. So it's nearly doubled in half a century, and it's not showing any signs of getting smaller. And the large reason is, or the largest reason is just simply people are living longer. So people taking Social Security at 62 may very well get Social Security benefits for 30 or 35 years, where, back in the 40s and 50s, longevity just wasn't nearly as long as it is today. So on the next slide, I just want to show a couple of things that have been discussed. Now, I don't want to create any panic here. You're going to see on most of these things, these are not things that are just going to affect retirees for the most part. And I don't think Congress is going to touch Social Security until the 11th hour. I mean, every time we have a debt ceiling issue, they literally wait till there's like 48 minutes left and then they figure it out. So I think we're going to see something similar with Social Security, and I think that's going to be a number of years down the road. But a few of the things that have been discussed that I just wanted to highlight, and I'm going to go ahead and start on the right side and then go back to the left, is they're probably just going to have to raise the retirement age. Now, again, they'll grandfather that in, so that's likely to affect people in their 20s, 30s, and maybe their 40s. But I could very, very easily see a situation where taking Social Security at 62 is going to get bumped up to 63, 64, maybe even 65 at some point for future generations, just because of the longevity and the ability for people to live in their 90s at a higher rate than they ever were before. That said, this is not necessarily going to affect anybody on this webinar, I don't believe. Social Security is very generous for the most part with their cost of living adjustments, which is one of the great benefits of Social Security. Congress could tweak how they calculate that cost of living adjustment, and those adjustments in the future could potentially maybe not be quite as generous. But essentially what they're going to have to do, because I don't see Social Security going away. I know people jokingly say it won't be there when I retire. I believe Social Security is such a fabric of our society. I don't think it's going to go away, but it is very possible that tweaks are going to have to be made, and probably those tweaks are going to be centered around raising revenue, or put another way, more taxes. So currently, people only have to pay Social Security tax on the first $142,000 of their earnings. Now, for most of us, we don't even make $142,000, so all of what we make is subject to Social Security tax. But, professional athletes, people that make literally millions of dollars a year, they only pay Social Security tax on the first $142,000 of their income. So that is certainly something that Congress could raise. Another thing they could do is they could just increase the FICA tax on everybody's paychecks. The FICA tax, I believe, is currently 6.2%, if I'm not mistaken. So they could certainly do that. You don't currently pay Social Security tax on dividend income and so forth. That's certainly something that's been thrown around. The estate tax threshold. Currently, I believe for individuals, that's at 11 million, and for couples, I believe that's at 22 million. It seems like from administration to administration, they kind of tinker with that. Some administrations raise that, some lower it. If they did lower that estate tax threshold, then that could potentially increase some revenue for Congress to have to make Social Security more solvent. But my main takeaway from this is the things that you see on here are just things that have been tossed out. I don't think Congress is close to enacting any of these things, but these are things that are most likely going to affect people that are currently working. Again, they're going to affect people in their 20s, their 30s, and their 40s. These are not adjustments for the most part that are going to have any impact on you as either a retiree or a soon-to-be retiree. So we don't necessarily need to go back to my first slide, but that first slide showing, should I take it at 62? Should I take it at 70? I think for the most part, you need to make that decision based upon your situation, your investments, what your spouse's working situation is and so forth. Don't take your Social Security benefit trying to guess what Congress is going to do, because I think that's a fool's errand, and that's not a winning strategy. So I wouldn't get too caught up in that. My last slide here, I started out by saying I would let you know how you can find out what your full retirement age is. If you go to ssa.gov, which is the Social Security website, it takes about 2 minutes to register your account. This will tell you what your full retirement age is. It will show you what your estimated benefit is at full retirement age. It will show you what your estimated benefit is at age 62, and it will also show you what your estimated benefit is at age 70. This is valuable information. So if you have not done this, this is something that I would do sooner rather than later, and provide that information to your financial advisor, because that's going to be a pivotal part of any financial planning that they may be doing on your behalf. Another important reason to go to ssa.gov is, your benefits are based on the top 35 years of earnings. So you want to go in there and you want to make sure that Social Security has your earnings history correct. If they miss 1 or 2 years and don't put your earnings history in there, that could affect your calculated benefit. So you just want to eyeball that, make sure there haven't been any mistakes made there. And like I said there, you can see on the 4th bullet point there, just make sure there's not any work history errors or omissions. So those are probably the 3 most common Social Security questions that I get. Again, there's 100 Social Security questions that you could potentially ask. If you have some that are on a general level, I'd be happy to try and answer those for you. If you have some that are, super specific to your situation, then those may be better conversations to have offline with your advisor. But I'll shut up there and open it up if you've got any questions for myself or for Shannon on anything that we've covered here in the last hour.
So if you're online, you can unmute yourself and ask a question if you'd like to. We are about 2 minutes from probably wrapping up, so we'll take a couple of questions. If there's no questions specifically, I'll jump in with the most asked questions that I hear. Shannon, this one's for you. So if I'm working past 65, can I stay on my employer plan? Do I need to delay Medicare? What factors go into that answer?
Yes. So the first thing I'd recommend is still to speak with a broker prior, right? Because there's a few factors, and we'll discuss that. So if you work for a company or your spouse and you're on their coverage, works for a company with more than 20 employees, you can delay Medicare past 65. And whenever you do finally decide to transition, we would start that process about 3 months out from when that coverage through your employer is due to end. The big key factors to keep in mind there is, if you are going to delay, some people decide to sign up for Part A during this time because it's free to them, typically paid through taxes like we discussed, and that's your hospital insurance and things like that. And that's fine to do. You're entitled to it. The caveat there is to know if you have an HSA plan, and most people have a health savings account high deductible plan these days. And as soon as you sign up for Medicare, even if it's just Part A at 65, and you and your employer are still contributing to this HSA, there will be tax implications. So if you have an HSA, moral of the story, and you're working past 65 and you're delaying Medicare, do not enroll in any part of Medicare. If you are working past 65 with more than 20 employees where it's credible coverage and you can delay without penalty, and it's not an HSA plan, and you want to collect on your Part A just for additional hospital insurance, go right ahead. Okay.
So it looks like a lot of factors go into that decision, and best practice, again, I think, is to talk with a professional. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Brandon, I'll just ask you one question.
We've got one in the chat. We've got one in the chat here.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much?
Unfortunately, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it's if you I think it kind of leads into maybe what Lisa was going to talk about. You can start taking Social Security while you're working, but if you start taking Social Security while you're working and you've not yet reached full retirement age, then there is a cap on how much you can make before you have to start paying some of that Social Security benefit back. The exact dollar amount, I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's a pretty low number. You do not have to work a whole lot to reach that threshold. So for most people, especially if you're working full time, I would not take Social Security before I reach full retirement age. I'm cautious to use the word never because there's always an exception to every rule, but I don't know that I've ever come across a situation where somebody was working full time and taking Social Security benefits prior to full retirement age made sense. Now, a lot of people retire, start taking Social Security early, and then they decide they're bored or they want to do something, they go get a part-time job. Then you have to kind of do some math, and I'd be happy to help anybody with that. One thing that I think is misunderstood is if you have to pay your Social Security back because you made too much money, you don't lose that money. You just have to pay it back, and then it's credited to you later on once you reach full retirement age. So it's not money lost, but it is money that ends up being deferred. And it's a little bit of a hassle. So it's better to stay under that threshold and not have to pay that money back if possible. But I can get that exact number and we can include that in the email that goes out with the slides or something if that would be helpful. I don't want to guess because I can't remember off the top of my head.
Brandon, I can chime in. I'm looking it up.
Okay.
For 2024, anything under 22,320. So
Okay.
anything above that, under age 65. If you're under 65 for the full year, it's $1 of benefit taken away for every $2 over that limit.
And that's a household income?
That one we'll have to finalize. I think,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're working 5-10 hours a week, you're probably safe. But if you're working 20-30 hours a week, you could come up against that threshold pretty quick.
I think we've got a question in the conference room too.
Yeah, hey Shannon, it's Katie, one of the advisors here at Prime Capital. I had a broker tell me a while back when we were shopping for a client's best plan to bring like the list of doctors that they see now that they feel like they just can't live without. And that was like a good barometer for like how we shop.
Yes, absolutely.
For a plan. And I don't know if you have any, like if you agree with that or like if you have anything else that you would add to that.
Yeah, I think I would love for clients to bring a list of their providers and their medications. And some people even bring me their tax returns from the 2 years back so they can get an idea of what their Part B premium is going to be. And just because that really does help me understand, and you don't have to kind of, the last thing we want to do is if you're interested in the Advantage plans, for you not to remember your dentist or your cardiologist, and then we put you in a plan and they're not in network because we have to be mindful of that there, right? So it is good to bring those lists so that we cannot forget about anyone, but also it gives me a better idea of your healthcare needs so that we can really talk through, if you're seeing a podiatrist once a month, what that's going to look like, which option you go with.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? I don't see any more in the chat.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and wrap this up here. We will make sure that you get a follow-up email with the slides. So if you have questions, please email Brandon, Katie, Matthew, or I, or Shannon with specific Medicare questions as well. We want to be a resource to you. Again, we appreciate your time and thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you all for having me.